And President Trump has already said he'll send lawyers to the swing states, setting up the possibility of contesting the election results. But where history is concerned, contested presidential elections are incredibly rare, and contesting a national election is easier said than done. Alexandra Lewis connects the dots.
Here's the thing. The presidential election isn't really a national election. It's 51 separate elections, one in each state and Washington, D.C. That means a losing candidate would have to contest the results in one or more states where he or she thinks there was a problem. But they'd have to wait until a state certifies a winner before filing a lawsuit. State courts handle most of these challenges. They only go to the Supreme Court if it seems like there are constitutional issues to deal with. That's happened twice. The most recent was the 2000 presidential race between George W. Bush and Al Gore. Remember hanging chads? As for whether a contested election could affect a peaceful transition of power, the Constitution requires the president and vice president into their terms of office January 20th. No president in history has ever refused to hand over power to the next. And that's connecting the dots.